Let my people go. What four words have resonated more through the bloodlines of human history? Out of the sands of Egypt, amidst the rivers of Mesopotamia, over the Himalayas, up through the snows of Siberia and down through the monsoons of Malaysia, the fodder of fiefs in Europe and plantations in the Americas, sugar below the equator and cotton above it, deserts, jungles, tundras, and tropics. No land is dry from the tears of captivity, and no civilization can wave clean hands. The only thing more ubiquitous than the institution of slavery in our world is our intuition that it's wrong. We can sniff the injustice across time and borders and cultures and philosophies. We know freedom is fundamental to our being. Freedom not only of body, but of mind. A man who is not allowed to think to the end of his own thought is no more free than a man who is not allowed to walk to the end of his own block. The desire to do and think for ourselves seems built into our DNA. It's part of the natural harmony that our souls yearn to sing along with. But why? What is it about freedom that is so important? Why is it so naturally perceived? What do we do with freedom if we're lucky enough to have it? We know so much about what freedom isn't, but do we know what it is? Let my people go. And then what? With the Red Sea still settling in the rearview mirror, the newly emancipated Israelites found freedom to be more of a foe than a friend. Say what you want about being in bondage, they grumbled to Moses. At least in Egypt, we sat around pots of meat until we were full. Look what you've done to us. It would have been better to stay and serve the Egyptians than to die out here in the desert. This was not the first, nor would it be the last time that humans have diagnosed the dilemma of hard freedom versus safe servitude. The wilderness is beautiful and rife with possibility, but it's also full of fiery serpents, scorpions, and drought. In all places, in all dispensations, there exists a burden in self-determination. There's always jeopardy in the journey. One of my earliest memories is of learning to ride a bike. It was certainly my first realization of freedom. Before being introduced to this wonder of two wheels, my backyard was my world. What lied beyond the fences that I saw in every direction was someone else's domain. But the moment my dad opened the gate and let go of those handlebars, the world became my backyard. There was something about the speed with which the air hit my face that made familiar streets come alive with possibility. Sidewalks became racetracks. Parking lots became coliseums of competition. I could now, by my own power, pedal into previously uncharted neighborhoods. I was now an explorer on par with those I'd begun to learn about in books. But this increase in mobility and territory came with an increase of dangers. One speeding car at the wrong place at the wrong time could mean never riding again. At any time, a curb could attack out of nowhere. My own pedals could strike at my shins. Converting the potential energy of steep hills into untamed thrills was a perpetual temptress. The pride of being the first amongst friends to accomplish some daring feat of bicycle wizardry that we saw in a movie most often could not be resisted. The temerity of adolescence assured there would be no shortage of mishaps. A particular rite of passage on my block was the log ramp. This tenuous apparatus consisted simply of said log and any board that could be rounded up and nailed to it. It was crudely yet carefully crafted so as to maximize launch distance. The physics of the jump were important because those whose turn it wasn't would have to lie beside each other next to the unramped side of the log to see how many parallel bodies could be cleared. You don't know fear until you're the last one in that horizontal stack, furthest from the ramp. You take one look at the tires barreling toward you that are now inflated saw blades, and at the determined but slightly panicked look on your friend's face as he pushes hard on his pedals, searching for the speed and guts required to fly over his recumbent buddies. You close your eyes and suck in every spare vacancy between your skin and your bones and make yourself as thin as possible and hope for the best. Between the thumb and wrist on my left hand, about where the arm hair gives up on its mission to the fingers, is a permanent reminder of another misadventure. I'd been entrusted to retrieve beverages for a cookout from the nearest convenience store. I've never been able to piece together exactly how it happened. I was just riding up a hill, probably imagining that I was winning some grueling race. Maybe it was a mismeasured gap in the sidewalk, maybe some unaccounted for sprinkling of sand. Whatever the culprit was, it swept me swiftly and mercilessly out of my imagination and into a reality of gruesome wounds on my wrist and knee. I'd accumulated my share of scrapes and bruises before, but an unfamiliar hue of red was an immediate indication that whatever had dug into my skin this time had excavated more layers than usual. Never went to abort a mission, though. I did the customary scan of important bike parts, and since it passed the inspection, I got back on and continued the trip to the 7-Eleven. I'll never forget the look on the cashier's face as I stoically presented her with a 6-pack of root beer that I intended to purchase. I knew about the peculiar gashes on my wrist and the blood running down my leg into my shoes, but I didn't know that I also had an open wound on my face. She asked something about needing help, and I mumbled something like, "No, I found everything okay." I think I was still oblivious to the extent of the damages until I got back to the barbecue and someone grimaced and said, "I thought we sent you to the store, not to a war." Hard freedom for me at that age was hard concrete, and I still have the scars to show for it. A decade and 2 more wheels later, I went through the same experience of expanded autonomy when I got my driver's license. My world grew even larger, and so did the perils and ramifications. I crashed my car, too, in a story I'll save for another day. Suffice it to say that one thing we know about freedom is that it isn't safe. Any worthwhile reward requires risk. No prospect comes without potential pitfalls. This is evident in all of life's endeavors, but also in the endeavor of life itself. My dad didn't have to let me ride a bike or drive a car. He could have kept me locked in the house, safe from all the dangers. He could have kept me from the experience. He could have saved me the scars. But he chose to expand my horizons by giving me a bike, knowing there would be days when I came home broken and in tears. And even knowing all the risks of the road, he paid for a car at his own cost and helped me to learn how to drive because he knew it would get me where I needed to go. As much freedom as a car provides, however, it's not given to us carte blanche. We don't have unrestricted, unconditional authority on where and how we can drive. The whole enterprise only works within a framework that was designed for it to function. There are speed limits that protect us from ourselves and others. There are traffic laws, aka commandments, given to us to help avoid crashes. We have to obey red lights and stop signs, as annoying as they are, when we feel like we should arrive somewhere faster. We have to keep a steady supply of oil in our engines to reduce friction and keep things clean. We have to constantly refuel lest we end up stranded somewhere short of our destination. We have to stay on the road. New York to Los Angeles is an amazing road trip, but good luck making it over mountain ranges, across rivers, and through deserts without abiding by asphalt. There's plenty of freedom along the way, countless things to do and choices we get to make, but still a framework to follow. Even in a huge country with such endless attractions, we can become resentful of these restrictions. In the spoils of modernity, we complain that these lanes are not enough. Why should there be any restraint on us at all? We think it more freeing to veer from the paved path before us and just go our own way. Let my steering wheel go. For who is this dictator that should lay down any sort of law that I should respect? It is here that I realize my car crash story should be told on this day after all. It begins just 2 blocks from my house. It's a matter-of-course morning. I'm headed to my friend's house to give her a ride to school. I'm stopped at 6th Street, one of the main arteries in the heart of Westside, Great Falls, Montana. It's a 2-way street with 2 lanes going in either direction. I need to make a right turn into the northbound lanes, but both lanes are full of idle cars, and I don't have time for such a standstill. First period social studies waits for no man. I noticed that the commuters have left a gap in the gridlock, which in hindsight was for cars traveling in the opposite direction to make a left turn onto the street that I was on. But what I see is a shortcut. I can just drive straight through this gap and make my right turn a few blocks later. In a paragon of teenage impulsivity, I press firmly on the gas pedal. About a second later, The world is whirling in all the turbulence that 4,000 pounds at 40 miles an hour can unleash. As the vehicular vertigo slowly subsides, I realize what had happened. From my myopic perspective, I saw a clear path to where I wanted to go. I couldn't see the cars in the southbound lanes coming due to the congestion in the northbound lanes. I acted freely, but my lack of responsibility impacted somebody else's freedom. Let my steering wheel go. And then what? Many years later, I would come across this quote from Viktor Frankl, Austrian psychiatrist and Auschwitz survivor. Freedom is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. Indeed, that irresponsible morning, I learned that freedom is not the full story. Let my steering wheel go is only half of the truth. Hard freedom for me at that age was a hard lesson. Ironically, that in recklessness, there will always be a wreck. You can't short-circuit the framework. Nelson Mandela echoed this sentiment when he said, "To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." The woman in the red car minding her business and abiding the law that morning did not deserve to be sent violently spinning by the boy in the black car. Her freedom was neither respected nor enhanced by mine. She was okay in the end, and for that I've always been thankful. But I'm still sorry for the screaming. And yet, the full story of this phenomenon that Frankl wrote about has not been told. It may start with freedom of mind to discern truth and freedom of body to move through the world. It may necessarily require recognizing and respecting boundaries with our fellow humans. But it doesn't end there. An ethical framework may help us from crashing into each other, but it doesn't keep our own engines running. It doesn't keep the garbage from piling up on the floorboards. It can keep the roads open, but it doesn't help us to know where we are going. And even if appearances advertise that we're not violating any traffic laws, we can still be a wreck. To answer the questions that mere ethics cannot, we have to recognize that there's also an internal framework. We have to look inside the driver. More and more, our fashionable creeds teach us that there is no such inner framework. Or if there is, any system of pre-established highways prescribing the flow of traffic should be raised and replaced with a labyrinth of idiosyncratic my ways. For freedom surely guarantees that I'm the transportation engineer of my own city. There is no mayor, no lawgiver above me, no greater power or wisdom to which I should submit. There is no magnetic north toward which my moral compass must point. And thus the kingdom of false freedom is like a kite, a resplendent mosaic of color and grace. A kite soars through the sky on the persuasion of a summer breeze. Inevitably it thinks, this is great. The sensation of flight, the artistry of my wings, the panoramic view. Yet I feel this tugging, this constraint. Surely I could fly even higher and more majestically if I could just break free from that despot down there, that fool with the spool and his rigid rules. Let my sail go. The kite that invokes its built-in severance system. A simple lifting of a lever sends the strangulating string spiraling to the ground. The kite shouts with euphoric glee, nothing shall tie me down, for now I am free. For a brief, unbounded moment, the kite experiences utter liberation and spreads its wings even wider. A friendly breath of air blows beneath and lifts it even higher. But it's a fleeting moment, for the next gust of air isn't as tranquil. A slight disturbance in flight disorients the kite. With no correction mechanism on board and no connection to ground control, it begins to twist maniacally in the wind. Before it can even grasp the gravity of the situation, it is nosediving toward the earth with accelerating desperation. Not more than a bystander's gasp later, it is a decommissioned pile of mangled sticks and paper. The stringless kite, no longer bound by its baron, is now a servant of the dirt. Let my sail go. And then what? Under the spell of ideologies that have elevated liberation to the heights of an idol. We are statistically and perceptibly more anxious, alienated, confused, and lost than ever. In some sense, we've internalized, let my people go for so long that we have an exodus complex. Our fortune is the freest and most opulent people in history, no matter. We're always searching for something to be freed from, some cord to cut. In practice, this requires the chronic dismantling of reality and the detection of ever new oppressions from which one needs to be liberated, even to the point of formulating new identities that exist only for the purpose of needing to be freed from something. No personality profile or political disposition is immune. When liberation is idolized into this isolated system of cord cutting, I wonder if we risk rupturing our main power supply. What if, in our obsession of being free, we end up severing the artery most vital to our hearts? What if one of the cords we cut was the anchor to our soul? 7 times in the book of Exodus, the phrase, let my people go, is repeated. But that's only part of the story and only half the truth. The part you never hear, the part the modern neo-liberator doesn't know or doesn't mention, the part that finishes the truth in all of its glory is, so that they may worship me. Every time. You can look it up. Let my people go so that they may worship me. Oh no, I can feel the exasperation. So we're just being freed from Pharaoh so that we can serve God? That's what freedom is? I'm afraid that's the bad news. And I'm overjoyed because that's the good news. Knowing this truth, the truth, is what shall truly make us free. Freedom isn't a matter of degree, but a matter of master. Is the teenager in servitude of TikTok more free than she was when she was rebuking her parents for not letting her have a phone? Is the drug addict more free than when he was inhibited from indulging in harmful substances? Is the rebellious traveler more free in the middle of the desert with flat tires full of cactus needles, more free than he was when he was restricted by roads? Does someone climbing and clinging to the corporate ladder for 80 hours a week not have a master? In the West, we rightfully revel in the abolition of chattel slavery. Yet how many millions labor in the chains of pornography on digital plantations far more vast and profitable than any slave owner could ever have dreamt of? As Paul said to the Romans, do you not know that when you offer yourselves as obedient slaves, you are slaves to the one you obey, whether you are slaves to sin leading to death or to obedience leading to righteousness? Peter would reiterate that a man is a slave to whatever has mastered him. Joshua, a personal witness to the Exodus and all that it entailed, elucidated this message centuries before when he said, choose ye this day whom ye will serve. There's always going to be a master. So we have to ask, whose benefit does the master have in mind? Who has the benefit of the teenager in mind? The concerned parents or the shareholders of TikTok? Who has the benefit of the man struggling to control lustful impulses in mind? The Apostle Paul or Pornhub? Who loves us and who wants to make a profit from us? Someone will be our Lord. One will turn our weaknesses into strengths. One will exploit our weaknesses for his own gain. One will advocate for us. One will accuse us. One will heal. One will fail. One saves and one seizes. One bought us with the price of his life and offers the inheritance of all that he has and is. The other offers to buy us with the price of our own life and discard us when he's done. Ultimately, one gave us the gift of hard freedom, overruling one who wanted to impose safe servitude. A sovereign God saw fit that his children be sovereign too. He could have kept us locked in the house, safe from all the dangers. He could have kept us from the experience. He could have saved us the scars. But he chose to expand our horizons by giving us this life, knowing there would be days when we came home broken and in tears. And knowing all the missteps, mishaps, and miscues that would ensue, his plan included a savior that would pay the costs because he knew it would get us to where we needed to go. The power and privilege of acting for ourselves means trials and tribulations. It means jeopardy in the journey. It means crashing into each other. But through it all, there's a string to hold on to, a crimson cord of grace and guidance, redemption and renewal, the constraint that lets us fly, the only true shatterer of our shackles, the only master that wants us to be free, even if it means choosing other masters. And so the full story of freedom unfolds. Freedom is hazardous. Freedom requires responsibility and operates within a framework designed in the interest of its participants. Freedom is the dignity of deciding our destiny. It couldn't be more beautiful or more crucial. Out of bondage and east of Egypt, out of the garden and east of Eden, we find ourselves in the wilderness, armed with hard freedom. This day and every day we choose. Do we serve the master who will continually unravel the spool and let us soar? Or the master who will bring us to the dirt? Does our servitude behoove us or belittle us? Freedom is so fundamental because it is so far-reaching. Every time we make a choice, we are crafting our character and charting our course. Let my people go. And then what?